we're going to do a little bit of a dive into the 365 because, as we all know, there are three versions of the 365. There is the original 365, there is this guy here, the 365 Special, and of course there's the 365X Torque. The lines between those saws are not as cut and dried and as firm as you would like to think they are, especially for those of us who are dealing with North American market saws, who primarily expect a 365 Special to have a closed port cylinder. That isn't how it works everywhere. And even in the North American market, there are pre-special saws that came with the closed port cylinder. So first off, what is the difference between a 365 and a 365 Special? Well, the cylinder is not part of what's different, because for many markets, the open port cylinder carried on all the way until 2008 at the end of it. So the cylinder itself is not what's the difference. The difference is the Special is built on the updated 372 cases and not the first generation 371 cases. What's the difference between those cases? Let's have a look. This is a 97 365, and I've never bothered to clean these cases up because we have a nice broken bar pad. Notice that it has a front chain tensioner. It does not have a side cover mounted tensioner. That is the one big difference between that and the later saws. The other one, let's see if we can see in here, is in this oil tank. Notice there's no big reinforcements in there. Whereas this later 365 case, because this is a special case, look at these reinforcement ribs. This is the difference between a 371 and 372 and a 365 and a 365 Special. Reinforced at the bar pad because they had issues with them breaking with long bars on the early saw. This one I don't think suffered that fate. I think that this case was full of water and it froze and broke. That would be my best guess on this. But hey, who knows? But being it was a local saw, I doubt it ever saw anything more than an 18-inch bar. Now onto the cylinders. Open port, closed port. And if you guys remember this saw, this is off of the 2165 Johnny that had holes drilled in it. But this is your EPA 365 closed port cylinder, and this is a non-EPA 365 open port cylinder. And when we look here, this is the 04 1999 IPL, and notice we have 365 EPA listed. And when we go down here and we see here with EPA, and the thing that'll define it for most of you who see it is the difference in the intake boot. Notice that the EPA cylinder uses the clamp we're all familiar with and goes on what people call the special cylinder, and the non-EPA cylinder has this bolted on clamp on the boot. When we look at the special IPL, so this is the first special IPL from November of 99, we'll notice that we are still defined the same way, and it's still listed as an EPA cylinder, and EPA boot and EPA clamp. Both of these parts books are early enough that 365 was still ZAMA equipped, so an early special will still have a ZAMA. It's not until the 2010 IPL that we see all markets listed as using the same cylinder. There is no 09 IPL, but the 08 one still shows Russia as using the open port cylinder. The first place we see the Walbro show up is on this January of 2002 IPL. But you have to remember that the IPLs usually reflect changes that have already been made. And this particular 365 is built the 20th week of 01, and it has always had a Walbro on it. So, end of the day, early 365 and 365 Special for markets outside of North America. I believe Europe through 05 and Russia through 08 according to the IPLs. I don't know about Australia. I'd assume they're the same as Europe. You have this here quad transfer open port cylinder with this bolted on intake boot clamp. A lot of guys call it a bolted on intake, but it's just the clamp that's bolted on. This guy here, this is our North American market EPA cylinder. And this exists only for emissions purposes, even though it is a better performing cylinder. This, for all intents and purposes, right down to the casting numbers on it, is a 372 cylinder with a smaller bore, and the transfer ports aren't as opened up as much. And if you're familiar with the 372 XPW cylinder, the transfers on those cylinders are very similar to these guys. So that's it in a nutshell. The difference between a special and an early 365 is entirely to do with the cases and not to do with the cylinder. I haven't mentioned the 365X torque. Those are pretty well documented. You've essentially got a 372 with some choked up transfer ports, and that's it. It's a 50 mil bore. It is otherwise identical to a 372 engine-wise outside of the transfer port covers and the low top air filter. All of these early 365s, of course, are 48 mil bore. Everything on this chassis is 36 mil stroke, and these guys are a true 65cc saw.